Hey, thanks for joining me tonight. I'm Ryan Backman, the founder, and hey, we got a little glitch here in the computer, so I wanted to check in. Um, I'm Ryan Backman, the founder and executive director of Project Cold Case, coming to you live from my home in in Florida. Wanted to give everybody a few minutes um, to join us, check in, getting set up here. Got a couple of things that I'm hoping to talk with you guys about. Um, Except this new platform is is a little bit different now, so I'm getting kind of getting the feel of it. This new Facebook dashboard for Facebook Lives. If you watch any of our lives, you usually see us in our office in downtown Jacksonville. I usually have Clint running the um, the board for me so that we can show videos and pictures, and we haven't quite got all of that figured out here, the remote working. But we're here. We're here to talk. We're here to answer questions. Here to kind of tell you a little bit about what I've learned over the last 10 plus years now of having um, being the survivor of a cold case. My dad was murdered in October 2009. He was shot in a robbery. Somebody walked in on him, shot him in the shot him kind of in the side and the back, and took his wallet and walked out. And so that's kind of where how I got involved and why I'm here and why I'm working so hard with so many others to try to come up with ways um, to assist other survivors and help people who are struggling with this stuff as well. So chime in when you can. If you're watching, let me know where you are. What's your If you have a loved one, tell us their name. Tell us where you're checking in from. Tell us how you're doing with your grief while stuck in your home or while you're having to go to work. If you're an essential employee, and you're either first responder, a medical professional, a grocery store employee, a restaurant, any of these people that are keeping us fed and alive right now. We want to know how you're doing. Um, Jack, we really do appreciate you chiming in with us and showing your appreciation for what we're doing. It's one of the things I want to talk about tonight. When you survive a cold case, when your loved one has been murdered and there's no answers, your loved one has been victimized and there's no answers. It really, really is a helpless feeling as a family member, and you really, really don't know, um, you know, where to turn, how to help, what you can do uh, to assist in an investigation. Hey, Tina, uh, checking in from California, and Robert Calderon, murdered December 18th, 2015. So, obviously, this December will be 5 years in that case. And, it's one of those things that, uh, we think about our loved ones every day, all the time, no matter what. We don't need a reminder, but there is something odd about an anniversary that is significant, the 5 years, the 10 years. Those things just really, really are hard. And sometimes you don't know why. Sometimes you're still going through the motions, doing everything you can. And then that anniversary date rolls around and you're a little less patient, a little less understanding, a little more emotional, and then it finally hits you. Oh yeah, yeah. This is 5 years. This is 10 years. This is significant. Hey, Mandy from South Carolina, Brian Wrigley's mom. Yeah, yesterday was 9 years. I was watching your post and thinking about you. We had Brian on our Facebook story and Instagram story. If you guys haven't checked that stuff out, every day we have whoever's in our system that has been that was murdered on that day, no matter how long ago it was. And I saw Brian's face a number of times yesterday, just checking social media and walking through. So we were thinking about you, Mandy, and your family and everybody that knew Brian and cared about Brian. Hey, Rebecca, it's great to see you on here checking in with us. Next week will be 4 years for Jonah. I remember that, um, very clearly because I had interaction with other people that were at at the party that Jonah was at, because some of them had been impacted by murder previously, and and so it kind of got back to me what had happened at that party, and was keeping an eye on the situation, and and hoping that at a party like that with all those people that somebody would do the right thing and come forward. So know that we're thinking about you, Rebecca, next week. Next week is actually National Crime Victims' Rights Week. That's a national thing where all the cities, all victim servicing professionals try to get together and provide resources and services and events for victims and their families. In Jacksonville, they usually have a whole week of things that go on, and we're really, really, really saddened that we're not going to be able to participate in that stuff this year, and do anything. But we will have a little tribute to victims on our Facebook page next week. We'll be doing a virtual vigil, and we'll keep you guys in the loop on that. It's probably going to be Thursday evening, and we'll have a little virtual vigil where all the victims' names that we have will run through, and honor them in some way. Thanks for checking in, Michelle and Diane. Diane says on the anniversary will be 25 years. And it's just, you think about how sometimes it just feels like yesterday, and then sometimes it feels like a lifetime ago. I was thinking about my dad today, and went for a long walk with the kids. They were on their bikes, and we were just walking, and we were just enjoying our company, enjoying being with each other, and and I started thinking about how they just had never met him. How my daughter is, man, she has taken on the world, one day at a time. My son is kind of same, just developing into his own little person, and and part of my dad is in there and in them, and but they'll never meet, and they only know each other through the stories that I tell, and the pictures that I show them. So thinking about you. Yeah, Helen. Yes. Helen Schaefer. We just did her spotlight. Katia, we just did her spotlight a couple of weeks ago. She was a local case here in Jacksonville, a hit and run. And, we were, we're always honored that you as families trust us with your loved one's story, to put their picture up, to tell their story, to raise awareness, and to help in any way that we can. And that was one that was just one of those cases that happens occasionally, where it's in the news and then it disappears, and that's not fair and that's not right. And that everyone should know every one of these victims' names, and know that somebody out there is responsible for taking their life, and that they're still out there, not accountable, no consequences for that action, and able to do it to other people. And that's just it shouldn't be a society that any of us want to live in. And so it kind of goes back to what we were talking about with Rebecca's son, Jonah Golden, that, at some point somebody's got to take responsibility and come forward and realize that, yeah, that's scary. And yeah, there's always fear of retaliation. But do you want to live in a world where these people are putting that fear into us, or do you want to put them away? And so that's what we want to do. Taylor from Virginia Beach, TJ's sister. Yeah, thank you, Taylor, for joining us. I've spent a lot of years working with your mom and Aaron, and trying to help with TJ's story, and make sure that that people out there know that TJ was literally just walking down the street one night listening to his headphones, and he was shot and killed on the sidewalk. And that, some of these cases just, they all are important to me. Some of them actually have a connection to, and TJ's was one of those. I lived right down the street from where that happened. I lived off Fort Caroline Road in Jacksonville at the time. Drove past that area all the time. And then I didn't know the guy that found TJ, but I knew his brother-in-law. And and they knew I worked at Compassionate Families at the time. And so obviously, they told me about that situation, and asked me, to reach out and to help when I could. And so I've, obviously grown very attached to TJ's mom and his family. And I hope that, that others know that he's never forgotten, just like none of these are ever forgotten. Janice, I'm going to get to your question here, because again, I get a little behind, get backed up trying to say hi. With your friend's murder, she had dated a guy that her family didn't know about. I believe he and another person were involved with the murder. I remember his height, weight, and hair color, but cannot remember his name. Is there anyone that can help me remember? We had a spotlight that we did recently on a young woman that was in the military, and she had a similar situation where she was dating somebody and had not informed the family about who it was, and had it was a nobody knows what the deal was with the relationship as to why she was kind of avoiding talking about it. And but when she ended up murdered in her apartment complex by her car, obviously there was, people need to know who that who that person is, so that they can just talk to them. Not that doesn't make you a murderer because you were dating someone that that hadn't introduced you to their family yet. But that was Marilyn Scott in Maryland, and what we would suggest in a situation like that is that you reach out to your that victim's coworkers, her other friends, her family, cousin, and I'll try to get together and brainstorm and figure out. I don't know if law enforcement has her cell phone records, his cell phone records. I don't know if you said, yeah, she was dating a guy. So that would be typically part of their investigation, and hopefully somebody told the investigators that she was dating somebody that nobody knew, because that would obviously help, and law enforcement could check who a phone was registered to, or any text messages that were going back and forth, possibly pictures that were on her phone, that kind of thing. So and law enforcement, the detectives probably wouldn't make that public if they had that information. So remember that too. It doesn't mean that they don't know. It just, but that would be, the best way to find out would be through investigation with the phone or computers, emails, some form of communication. They had to be communicating some way, and then they can reverse track and try to find out who it is. I hope that helps. Donna says, hoping for justice in Texas for Miranda Street. Yeah, that's another case that that when we put it on our social media page, it just blew up. Miranda obviously had a lot of people that cared about her. We have a good following. We have a lot of people. The best part about our our network of people that watch these lives and that follow our page and like our comment on our stuff is that they're vested in solving these cold cases by raising awareness. What that means is we don't go out and buy likes. We don't boost post to try to get people to like our page. We don't beg people that aren't interested in cold cases to like our page. Our likes are organic. They're people that have a passion for assisting, typically because they have experienced this type of loss. So when we share something, then those people share things, and that's how we reach people. And that's really what Miranda's friends and family did the first time we shared her image. And and it's one of the reasons we always tell families, if you've heard this from Frida, you've heard it 100 times. Get involved, get engaged, and share these posts and share these stories, because that's how we're going to reach the person that has the information. The woman that was asking about figuring out who the name of the person, share these stories. You know what I mean? Because that somebody may have know that information and not know that somebody's looking for that information. You know what I mean? This is just a example. The guy she's dating showed up at her job to drop off keys, drop off candy, drop off whatever, take her to lunch, and somebody saw, maybe she introduced. So that's a way to ask people, to get involved and to help and kind of alleviate that helplessness. Miss Jones is watching again. We love you, Miss Jones. And somebody asked to do the deck of cards again. So let me talk about that for just a second. So I showed these last week that we created a deck of cards. This is not the traditional decks of cards that get put in prisons for inmates to look at to see. Actually, very proud of these. Clint designed them. It was for a conference, a homicide investigators conference in Norfolk, Virginia. And we knew we marketed these cards to individuals we knew would be there. We knew that they were homicide investigators, and we knew a lot of them what cities they were coming in from. We actually had some law enforcement request certain images, certain victims to be put on. But if you see, like, there's no phone number on there. If you have a tip, call this number. There's no reward. These cards are usually done by like Crime Stoppers and groups like that that have money for rewards. And so what we wanted to do was we wanted the law enforcement officers, the detectives, to be scrolling through here and realize that, oh, wait, that's my case, or that's my agency. And, let me take a look at this. Let me get back home and look at it. And so, last week we mentioned that Vanessa Honey Malone's case was solved, a week ago, 2 weeks ago. Days are all running together right now, so bear with me. But she was one of the cards in the deck. But these detectives were coming from all over the country, so we didn't just pick cases from Jacksonville. In fact, I think we only had one case from Jacksonville because I was the only. Well, I shouldn't say I wasn't the only representative from Jacksonville. There were no representatives from the Jacksonville Sheriff's Office. There were investigators for the Florida Department of Law Enforcement that work out of the Jacksonville field office, and one of them was retired Jacksonville Sheriff's Office detective. So he was former JSO, Jacksonville Sheriff's Office. But I knew that there wasn't going to be anybody else from the sheriff's office there, so I only put one victim on the card because I wanted to utilize the people that were going to be there. So this case was submitted to us by a detective up in Rhode Island, and Detective Cormier, and so we knew that there was going to be some Providence, Rhode Island detectives there, so we put that case on there. So that's kind of just to let you know, like all of these cases were, there's the one from Jacksonville was Vera Sullivan, an unknown Jane Seneca Doe from Illinois. This we did a bunch from Virginia because that's where we were going to be, and we knew that there would be a lot of people there. But South Carolina, North Carolina, Virginia. Those of you that are familiar with Project Cold Case will recognize that face. Carrie Singer, she was killed up not far from where we had the conference. So we threw that one in, and Carrie's mom, Patty, was the victim advocate for our office for a long time, and still stays in touch with us and volunteers. So yeah, we will be doing more of these cards, but remember, there's only 52 cards in a deck. So trying to figure out which 52 victims to put in is extremely, extremely difficult. We have to separate emotion from it, and really try to guess which is the best case for that event. The next conference that we want to do it for is in Albuquerque, New Mexico. So we have an agreement with the organizers. We will know at least most of the agencies that have registered in advance so that we can pick cases from those agencies. And of course, the first thing we do is we look to cross-reference a case that's been submitted to us by a family with an agency that is showing up. And if we have a match there, that's the one we use. And if we don't have a match there, then we reach out to law enforcement. We reach out to contacts and try to find somebody. So the decks of cards are always something we want to do. It's something we would love to do for every single, victim that we have. But at this point, that would take, a bunch of decks. So it would be 10 different decks, and you have to buy these things. I think we bought 300 or 400 of them at a time, and they're very expensive for the printing. So but it is definitely something we can and will do. Hey Siobhan, thanks for checking in with us. Actually, since hopefully you're still on, I'm getting backed up here, but I have been reviewing that stuff that you sent me, and I'll shoot you an email here in the next couple of days. I haven't forgot about you, but I have been looking at that stuff that you emailed me. Vicki Harris and Fernandina Beach, and her brother Jackie, 2015 case. Let's see. Yeah, Taylor talking about stuff happens, and I know like with TJ's case, we helped facilitate getting that one on the local news. I guess it's been a couple years ago now, and that did start people talking, and it did start some active investigation into that, into TJ's case, and wherever that led, it did not lead to an arrest, or at least not yet. And so, but that's why we continue to do this. Terry Spates in Green Cove Springs, which is where my dad lived, down in Green Cove. Your daughter was a hit and run victim in November of '96. And I want to say that's Dana Solomon. Terry, if you're on there. Yeah, okay, you posted it later. Yeah, Dana Solomon. Yeah. She's been on our page, for almost as long as we've been around. That case is one that has been with us since the beginning. When we first started out, we just kind of had to rely on word of mouth and a few people that we knew from the organization I worked at prior. And so, some of these cases, we had a mom reach out to me the other day, and she's just upset because this September will be 10 years. Her son should have been turning 30 in August, and in September, it'll be a 10-year anniversary of his murder of a road rage down in Central Florida, and she just is frustrated that nobody's talking about the case. His face isn't out there anymore, So, and right now with the media, it's COVID-19 or nothing. I mean, the weather and the virus, and pretty much anything else is on the back burner now and really hard to get anybody to pay attention. So, but hopefully by September that will have changed. And so we're kind of trying to help advise her on reaching out to the media now. This goes for anybody that's watching or listening. Reach out to that media now. Start laying the foundation for a story when things, you know, hopefully, get better with the virus. Those media outlets are going to be hard pressed to fill those time slots now at that point where they don't have the virus to talk about. So they may be looking for cases that may be a prime time to hit them up, but hit them up now to lay the foundation, create relationships, and start, getting on their calendar. Victoria Watkins, what if we have a case, but law enforcement hasn't or won't even categorize it as foul play? My family member left his home in the middle of the night for his girlfriend and has yet to be found. 3 years have passed, no answers yet, none at all. Victoria, you are in a situation, your family, with missing persons that is, just so frustrating and hard to deal with. What person just gets up in the middle of the night and leaves and then just has no contact with anybody? But I have talked to law enforcement and asked them this question, why do you not suspect foul play? And usually their answer is, oh, we absolutely suspect foul play, but we can't go public and say that and then this missing person turn up on somebody's doorstep and say, no, I'm right here. I left because I wanted to. And unfortunately that has happened. And so it's really more of a fear, on law enforcement's part of being embarrassed and getting it wrong. You don't want to make a lot of assumptions in these cases. And when you start making assumptions, it can start sending you down the wrong road, and down the wrong path. But as a family member, you also have to remember that that person, better than law enforcement. Law enforcement doesn't know that person. They don't know those things. All they have to go on is what you say. So obviously I don't know the specifics about your case, but I am curious whether they do actually, suspect something. They just are scared to say that out loud, or again, not knowing the situation. We have scenarios here where people run away, and they run away a lot, and it's kind of the like it's frustrating for law enforcement too, because like the little boy that cried wolf, if you keep running away, and then you disappear and foul play is suspected, people think you just disappeared. And we have multiple cases of missing persons where they were known to disappear for days and sometimes even weeks at a time. And family, that's just, it was just the lifestyle that they lived, whether it was, trouble at home and they didn't want to be there, or whether it was a party lifestyle, or whether it was a boyfriend, this girlfriend that their family didn't approve of. There are countless reasons why somebody would sometimes has disappeared and not been in contact with their family, and it not been foul play. But in some of those situations, something did happen at a later date that was criminal, and quite honestly, law enforcement is a step behind because they thought it was just another example of them running away, just another time that they disappeared without talking to anybody, telling anybody where they were going. So those cases are particularly hard. There's certain things that the missing persons detectives I talk to, look for. And again, I don't know the specifics of the case you're talking about, but keys, wallet, cell phone, clothes, vehicle, was that stuff there? Was it gone? Was it recovered? Did they find a a car? Did they find a wallet? Did he use a cell phone? Did he use a credit card? Did everything disappear? Did a car disappear, a wallet, cell phone, and its cell phone's never pinged, credit cards never been used? And are there waterways near your house? I mean, there are so many scenarios. I had somebody that owns a boat and a sonar and volunteers to search for cars, missing people, suicides, those kinds of things, and rivers, lakes, and canals. And he told me one time, he said, if you ever get somebody that just disappears off the map, but their car never shows up anywhere, their cell phone never pings, their credit cards are never used, start looking for bodies of water near their house, because he said, that's where we find those people. We find a car, at the bottom of a boat ramp, sometimes intentional, sometimes not. And, or in a retention pond or in a canal. It happens, unfortunately, to a lot of elderly people in South Florida that get confused, and they drive off the road into a canal, and there's nothing criminal about it, but obviously they've disappeared. So there's a lot of scenarios. Victoria, reach out to us in our office, and maybe we can assist and help in some ways. Siobhan, 12 years on March 5th, yeah, for John Paul Stoner. Let's see. Janice, I did share, but because I can't remember his name, I was told it will come back to you. Well, we are on 42 years. Gosh, that's a long time. And I mean, I really, really have a hard time remembering names of people I met, yesterday and today. So the only thing I can really tell you, Janice, if you've tried those things is you can't beat yourself up. I mean, obviously, if you could remember, you would. That's we all forget. We all we all have those things that we wish we could remember, or we want to know that one thing. Maybe they said something that we didn't know at the time was important, and now they need it. Back in 78, she was 16. Janice, if you still have contact with that family, with the victim's family, I don't know if they're on our site yet, but if they're not, please reach out to us and see if we can get that family and see what we can do to maybe assist that family, and at least raising some awareness, getting that the victim's picture back out there. Maybe somebody will remember something. Mandy's asking, in Brian's case, if it's possible that the parents of the young man that hit Brian and know their son is responsible. Or she's saying it is possible, and how can they live with themselves? They need to put themselves in my position as a parent. Mandy, I couldn't agree with you more. I always try to put myself in somebody else's position, and I always, try to think of what I would do. And it's easy for me to say, because I've been through the loss of a loved one, that if somebody I knew or loved hurt somebody else, that I would turn them in, and I maintain that I would. Of course, I'm not in that position, and hopefully I never will be. But I was just reading a police report today that made my stomach turn, because investigators were talking to somebody, and they said the mother came up and said, well, I really don't want you talking to my son. And then the dad came up and said, don't reach out to my son anymore. He's not going to talk to you. And when the detectives tried to reach out to him again, the dad took the phone and said, I told you, if you call my son again, he's going to get amnesia. We have to live in this area. And we fear retaliation. And they wouldn't cooperate. And that's, a little different than being a parent, than knowing your child did it. But that's being a parent and knowing your child has information that could solve a murder, and you make that decision. And, I try not to judge people in their situation. Maybe they don't have anywhere else to go.
But there's really kind of that part of me that just feels like there's doing what's right, and then there's doing what's wrong, and and there's if there's gray area there, it's hard for us to see as survivors, as the victim's family. So so in that case, Mandy, these hit and runs, somebody knows, and in Brian's case, where he was riding down the road in the middle of the day, and the truck that hit him actually crossed the center line and hit him. Obviously the person that hit him knows, but then there was witnesses that said they saw the truck with a tire sticking out of the grill. And that truck had to be. They know what the model of truck. They know the color of the truck. Somebody knows who was driving that truck in that area at that time, and they know that all of a sudden he got it wasn't around, that it was in the shop, or it was in his garage, and then it was fixed or painted or whatever. I think in hit and runs, I think you have a hard time convincing me that somebody else doesn't know that car was damaged, and that car was involved in something. And it's possible that somebody could come up with an excuse. Yeah, I hit a deer the other day, or somebody stopped short and I rear-ended them, whatever, that they could make something up. But if that truck, and I think it was a Ford Ranger or something, that truck at that time in that area, and that it had front end damage, you don't have to be a detective to piece those things together and at least make a phone call and say, I don't know if it's anything. It may be nothing, but Steve drove a truck just like that at the time, and here's his name and address. So, I absolutely believe. I remember one time I walked out of my front yard, and the neighbor was standing in my driveway looking at my car, at the front of my car. And I said, "Hey, what's going on?" And she goes, "Nothing. How are you?" And she's looking at my car, and I'm like, "What's going on?" And she said, "Did you hit a car up the street the other night?" And I said, "No." And she said, "Well, the woman down the street said she was walking her dog, and she saw an SUV come flying down the street, hit that car that was parked on the side of the road, and then pull into your driveway." And so I said, "Well, you can see that there's no damage to my car, so I don't know." I said, "Did your friend call the police?" "Well, no, she was scared." And I'm like, "Well, I don't really have time to talk to you about your friend that is going to accuse me of hitting someone's car, but doesn't have the courage to call the police." And then we looked over, and in the driveway in between my house and this neighbor that was checking out my car was an SUV with a flat front tire and the headlight missing and damaged. And I go, there's your car. There's the car. It didn't pull in my driveway. It pulled in, the driveway next to mine, and there's the damage. And the woman literally looked at me and was like, "I don't think she would do that." And I'm like, "Oh, but I would," So I don't know. The people out there, I don't understand, why they make the decisions they make, and why people are accusatory towards towards others, but then don't judge those that are actually responsible. And let's see. Crack a cold case. Carrie Singer was on The Killing Fields, and that was a horrible experience for everybody involved. And so we, when families ask us a lot of times, to help them get their loved ones show on television, there's a very fine line between raising awareness and then feeding a true crime culture where murder is entertainment. And The Killing Fields believes that murder is entertainment. And when they reached out to us, they actually reached out to Project Cold Case. That's how they got the Carrie Singer case. And and they said all the right things, told us, how this was all about the victim and getting them justice. And then sure enough, we did that, and we have regretted it ever since. So no, we don't do a lot with um, national shows. And that reminds me, somebody just sent me an email the other day about that, and I need to reach back out to them. So let's see. So I'm trying to play catch up, and I know Clint is um, chiming in and trying to answer questions. I don't know who Crack a Cold Case is. I prefer to individuals, who I know who they are, so I can address them. But let's see, and your experience. Let's see. In my opinion, cases go cold when they are no longer leads. What can we do? Keep cases alive in the news media. Yeah, I mean that's what we do. So let's see. Okay, Diane, frustrating was finally, yeah. So Diane's husband, Pat McMahon, was our next local case that we were going to get on the local media and news, and it didn't. The COVID virus took over, and so it's still the next one that's going to get done. We just don't know when that will be. But that is frustrating. I don't think this thing is putting these comments in order, so I'm kind of like, I think I'm responding, and then and then I scroll down a little bit, and there's a comment that I think was actually before then. So just bear with me as I try to catch up and scroll. And yeah, as the Crack a Cold Case thing. So we started with we had some questions as to that we were going to answer, like when is a case cold, and yeah, it's basically every jurisdiction has their own interpretation of what a cold case is, but a case is cold when there are no more leads to follow, when there is no more evidence to run, and there's nothing left to look at. Now, that is a very fluid situation. A case can be cold at 6:43 p.m. on April 14th, and tomorrow morning when the detective rolls in and there's a Crime Stoppers tip on their desk, then that case is not cold. I mean, if it's a viable tip, so. But that's what most agencies use, and quite honestly, some agencies don't even use the term cold case. Somewhere along the line, somebody told the sheriff's offices that cold implies that nobody's working on it. So try not to use that term. Of course, the reality is that nobody was working on them, and they were cold. It was actually the perfect definition. It just they didn't. They didn't give families enough credit that we know that our loved one is dead. We know that our loved one was murdered at the hands of someone else, and we know that that no one's been arrested. And you really can't sugarcoat that. You can call it whatever you want to call it. You can try to come up with another term that isn't cold, but at the end of the day, when a case is not being investigated, that's what it is. That's the common pop culture term. That's what everybody knows it as. No, none of us want our case to be cold. None of us want, our case to be sitting on a shelf. But sometimes that's what it is. And when it is, quite honestly, like I would just rather somebody just admit that and own it and tell me there's nothing we can do. I had a good relationship with the detective on my dad's case, the supervisor of the detective on my dad's case, his supervisor, their supervisor. I mean, all the way up. Um, they and that relationship was good because they were honest with me. And every time I hear families' frustration with law enforcement, it is almost always with a lack of communication and honesty. And I think that we could cut through a lot of that if people would just be truthful and be honest. Sometimes the truth does hurt. And you know what? Some loved ones sell drugs, some loved ones buy drugs, some loved ones sell their body. Um, some loved ones hang out with people we wish they didn't hang out with. None of those are reasons why they deserve to be murdered. None of those are reasons why they should be dead. And then there's obviously people that were just going to work one day or riding their bike or, you know, any number of scenarios, going to the ATM. And, but let's be honest about it. What is the status of the case? And don't try to sugarcoat it for me. Let me try to get back to some of these questions. I see this thing, Crack a Cold Case emailed me. Good deal. I'll definitely check that out. Lisa Key says she's working on getting a police report, but they didn't even give us a report or anything. I had to buy an autopsy report. So, one of the things I did as I was experiencing my grief and going through my grief journey was which I'm still on, by the way. You don't ever get over something like this. You don't ever, that hole is always in your heart, and there's nothing that can fill it. But you do start to learn how to live with it. But one of the things I did was I started educating myself on all things cold case related, and we send out public records requests all the time. And we try to, and so, again, each state has their own sunshine laws, what's available, what's not. When you get into these cold cases, a lot of times law enforcement doesn't want to call them cold or inactive because then those reports are public record. And for some good reasons, law enforcement doesn't want to release that information really ever. And, and I think it's interesting in the way people handle things differently. My dad's case, the detective was always honest with me. It wasn't until 10 years later after the detective retired that I ever filed a public records request on my own dad's case file because I never needed it. I knew I had built a relationship and a trust, and I knew I could call any number of individuals at the sheriff's office investigating my dad's case and get whatever answer it was that I needed. Now, I also recognize that not everybody has that relationship, and not every agency, is probably, or detective is willing to share as much as my detective did. My dad's detective did, but I have figured out that if they don't want to release that information to you, they simply call it an active case. And then they hide behind a sunshine law that says they don't have to release that information to you. Lisa, the fact that you got an autopsy, but not the police report is actually kind of unique. Typically, the medical examiners don't release that information without a detective's permission. And here in Jacksonville, not only the detective, but also the state attorney. Both of them have to give permission before they'll release an autopsy report to a family. But typically you can get once a case is suspended or cold or inactive or whatever word, that agency wants to use, typically you can get access to those police reports. But remember that it's all in wording as well. I just got a response from and I'm going to call them out just because, we work with a lot of law enforcement agencies and many of them are receptive and helpful and understand that what we're doing is for a greater good and that our goal is always to work hand in hand with them. But every now and then we get one that just doesn't want to participate, doesn't care. It's for the greater good. And it's the Hialeah Police Department in Florida. And we did a public records request, and they responded and they said, all of our unsolved cases are active, and so you're not allowed to have them under our records sunshine laws. So I responded and congratulated them on actively working all of their cold cases, and asked them if they had a dedicated cold case unit, and asked them to comply with the rest of the records request, which was the total number of unsolved cases that they have. So I'm still waiting on that response. I did get an email back that they were forwarding it along to the appropriate people, but that happens to all of us. There are certain agencies that will hide behind that and just say. And by the way, we weren't asking for case files. We were just asking for victims' names, locations of homicides, and age, gender, race, and just to put in our cold case database. We weren't asking for anything that shouldn't be public record. So, but that does happen. And Lisa, I would ask, and I don't know if you've responded down below. I'm trying to keep up, I promise. But if you did that while the investigation was active, if you requested the police report while it was active and they didn't provide it, that's a no-brainer. That happens pretty much every agency all across the country. If that case has since been either suspended or inactive or cold or whatever they may call it, let's try again and try it in a manner that cites the statute in your state for public information. These are Freedom of Information, FOIA. You'll hear that called, when Freedom of Information Act. Cite those laws and statutes in your request, and be very specific about what you're asking for and why. Even in cold cases where they do send us police reports or offense reports or supplemental reports, there's still information that is redacted. It's each agency interprets the laws their own way. And so we get cases that that redact, redact information about like surveillance cameras, like, that there was a camera outside. Not that it saw anything, but it just that there was a camera outside. And then we have other agencies that will provide us suspect information, social security numbers. They won't redact anything, and it just is kind of agency to agency. So Lisa, take that into consideration when the last time you requested that report, and you might be able to get it now. I would caution anybody that gets a copy of their police report, their case file, the offense and supplemental reports. Don't share those with just anybody. And I mean, when I say just anybody, the fewer people, the better. In my experience with law enforcement, they are overprotective of that information, but it's because it happens where a family will share too much with someone. They'll share too much with the media. They'll share too much with somebody else involved in the case. Again, a report I was reading the other day, the police literally noted in the report that they had to ask the victim's wife to stop talking to people, that she was jeopardizing the investigation, because by the time police were getting to these people, she had already gone to them and tried to interrogate them herself, and was a detriment to her husband's case. And so if you get that information, I hope that you'll be protective of it. And if it's for your own information, and so you can understand, I get that. But if it's for for any other reason, just I wouldn't share that information. I really wouldn't. Unless you can trust that person. So I would just limit who share it with. Let's see. I know you. Yeah. Jewel asks about a case that was determined a suicide, but evidence shows otherwise. Can it be considered a cold case for our review? So we're not investigators. We don't investigate cases. So there's nothing we could do with that case. We wouldn't, even if we did investigate it, we don't have any type of jurisdiction or legal authority to change a determination. We get that question a lot, and there's a lot of families out there that don't believe their loved one's suicide was a suicide. That's really just not something that we can assist with because we don't know. I mean, that's not our expertise. It's not our niche. What we have done in our organization has spent the better part of 10 years just educating ourselves and learning, and then trying to share that information with other families and raise awareness for cases. So there is a group called Parents of Murdered Children, and they, on their website, it's a national group, and on their website they have a tab called SOS, I think, and it's called Second Opinion Services, I think is what it stands for, or something like that. And they think they charge you like $100, but they claim that, and we've never used it, and so it's not an endorsement of them, but we get a lot of people that ask about suicides, and so you could potentially submit the case to them and have them review it. Again, read all the fine print because they don't have jurisdiction to change a death determination. They obviously don't have jurisdiction to make arrests and stuff like that. So, and I have to say also, the sheer number of suicide cases that get that reach out to us thinking that it's a homicide, really, really causes me to wonder. I can only imagine how hard it is to be a family of somebody that takes their own life. And that might be something that's really, really hard to accept. But in the few cases, the people that have sent information over, a lot of them, honestly, from a unemotional, unbiased opinion, look like suicides. So I think that you're in an uphill battle, Jewel, if you have a loved one whose case wasn't a suicide but was ruled a suicide, because there are a lot of cases out there that are ruled suicides that are suicides, and it's families that just have a hard time accepting that. And I've often hoped and wished that somebody would start an organization that had lost somebody to a suicide and it wasn't a suicide, that could help families like yours, because it's just outside of our wheelhouse, and there's no assistance that we could really provide you other than, again, that referral to that SOS group. Let's see. Shannon Miller, who made this comment hopefully only 12 minutes ago, so maybe you're still on here. That your mom was murdered in 1975, still unsolved. And so we touched on this a little bit last week with these, or 2 weeks ago, whenever it was, with these 1970s cases and 80s cases, is they should not be given up on. But right now, the hot tool for solving a cold case is genetic genealogy. And so a lot of times cold case units and families are trying to utilize that investigative technique because they have the best chance of solving a case. But in 1975, did the detectives and evidence technicians collect biological material that could be extracted, DNA could be extracted from? Well, they didn't know that DNA was in blood, that you could identify a criminal or a suspect or a victim that way. So, so those are questions that you have to start at the very beginning. What evidence is there in a 1975 case, and what of that evidence can be applied to technology that is current that we didn't even ever imagine would exist in 1975? But I don't say that because I'm telling you, without DNA evidence, you're not going to solve a case. 1975 cases, 1980s cases, 90s cases, those cases are primed for a detective that likes to get out and interview witnesses and suspects, re-interview witnesses and suspects, because those are perfect for changes in relationship. And before DNA and before genetic genealogy, the way cold cases were solved was a change in relationship, whether that was uh, an addiction, overcoming an addiction, whether it's getting out of an abusive relationship, whether it's severing ties with, a bad seed that you grew up with, whether it's finding religion, all of those things can kind of be lumped into changing in relationships, so a relationship with yourself, relationship with others, relationships with entities, and somebody may now be willing to come forward that wasn't willing to back then because of whatever their situation was back then, and don't ever give up hope, because what you need is a detective to take a look at that case and say, we suspected it was the neighbor. The neighbor was married to so and so. They got divorced 10 years later. And I'm going to go track down his now ex wife, and ask her, what really happened. And so hopefully um, that happens. Yeah. Yeah, so talking about lifestyle again, Shannon, and we mentioned that earlier. I hope you were watching when I said that. That's just um, it's there's no reason why one human being should take another human being's life. They don't have that authority. Whether, like I said, whether it's drugs, prostitution, partying, whatever it is, that's not a justified means to murder somebody. But the more and more, you know, detectives that I know, especially seasoned detectives, ones that have been around, they really, really, and I say this with the ones that I have dealt with, they don't care what the victim's lifestyle was, um, because quite honestly, an unsolved case reflects negatively on them, and they do take that personally. I mean, I know there's some law enforcement that chimes in occasionally, but the egos and the alpha personalities that make a good detective um, don't allow for them to fail, and not take it personal. So it's really more difficult than people think. Um, because of lifestyle, at least now with seasoned detectives. I obviously would never say that's the case. A lot of people talk to me about my dad's case and say, you know, I mean, that's one of the ones we really wanted to solve. It was a real victim or a true victim. And then they immediately realize what they said, and they go, I mean, they're all victims and we care about all of them. But obviously if you make that distinction, then there are times when you think that somebody, you know, doesn't necessarily require maybe as hard a work or as much attention. I would hope that if that was the case, then that maybe it's cold, and that's a good thing, because maybe you can get a new detective to look at it. Maybe that detective wasn't a good fit for homicide. Maybe there's somebody somewhere else now working on auto thefts, or working a crosswalk instead of investigating homicides. And so, keep that in mind when, as detectives leave and retire and promote and transfer, that really isn't a new opportunity to develop a new relationship with a detective and have somebody else look at it. Because while one person um, may not care about solving your loved one's case, if somebody gets in front of somebody else's eyes, maybe they will think differently about it. Let's see. Diane, I really appreciate it. Diane says she would be just as excited if my dad's case was solved. And I can tell you guys this. I think part of the reason why I do this and why I can do this is because my dad's case, I know the ins and outs of it, and I don't believe that it'll be solved. And so what that does is it allows me to shift my focus a little bit and look at things in a little broader perspective and a bigger picture. Of course, I want it to be solved, and of course, that's my hope, and I'll always have hope that it will be. But I've figured out that if I've spent all of this energy and attention just on his case, it probably wouldn't be good for me. It wouldn't be good for my mental health. It wouldn't be good for my family. And by doing Project Cold Case, it allows me to focus on things that I can do that make me happy, that make me feel good, and that are a positive reflection on my dad, and those kinds of things. Again, my dad's case, I just don't believe it'll be solved. It could be solved, but I've looked through the case file and looked at the evidence, and I don't point the finger at the detective. I don't point the finger at the agency. Sometimes cases don't get solved, and I hate that. But I think that, by recognizing that, it allows me to shift my focus a little bit. And Diane, I think there's a lot of people that share your sentiment there, and that means the world to me. I mean, to have that many people pulling for my dad's case to be solved too is a pretty cool thing. And every time I meet a new detective, a new forensic scientist, a new sheriff chief, and they find out about my dad's story, it almost every single one of them offers their assistance. Well, if you ever want me to take a look at it, I'd love to take a look at your dad's case. Did they look at this? Did they look at that? And it's flattering, and I appreciate it. And if I had a case that I thought maybe that would help, I would be more inclined to take them all up on that. But, and not to say I haven't had people look at it and don't have people look at it. I do, but it does allow me to focus other. Crack a Cold Case is asking what CCR means in the database. That's the basically the report number that the law enforcement agency uses. So it's typically like the year that the murder happened, and then they typically start at crime number 000001, and by the end of the year, depending on how violent your city is, it's at 003,009 or whatever. So but that's the CCR number. Yeah, and I see Clint answered that in a post too. So let's see. I have a sister that's been missing since 1974. She was 13. I have been told as well, since the case is open, I cannot see the records. I've been searching for over 20 years, and I get frustrated. Yeah, Lisa, that's back to, the real easy way for a law enforcement agency to keep things from you is to just say that it's active or open. And by most laws, they don't have to release that information if it's open. Now, is it open? Is it active? Or is that just the administrative term? And there's two ways to handle that situation. If you believe that is just the administrative term, what you can try, what I recommend, and what has worked best for us is developing a relationship with that detective. And when they get to trust you and know that you are not out to sabotage them or ruin their career or point the finger at them, they may be more willing to talk to you about that stuff. If you have gone down that road and it's not working that way, we still recommend that you keep it professional and go through their chain of command to try to address that. Their supervisor, whether it's a sergeant or a lieutenant or a chief a captain or a sheriff or whatever it is, to go up the chain of command to try to get answers respectfully. And of course, if none of that works, then you can you can try other means, like going to the media and voicing your frustrations publicly. Again, if you get in just a finger pointing, name calling, shouting match, it really doesn't reflect well on you or your loved one. But if you go forward and you tell the truth about how frustrating it is to be held at arm's length 20 plus years later, somebody's gonna take hopefully take a little sympathy, be a little empathetic maybe in that agency, and maybe they'll reach back out to you. I mean, they really don't want that to be how they're viewed publicly. So we don't recommend that you do that first. But if you run out of options, Anna asks, do we automatically contact family members when something significant about a case is revealed? If so, how do my info included? I know my aunt and cousins contacted y'all, but if possible, I would like to be in the loop. Yeah, Anna. So and this is, if we only have a couple of family members, we certainly will reach out to all of them. So call our office, 904-525-8080. Speak to Frida. Frida is our victim advocate, and she keeps all family members' contact information in a computer program that allows her to search and contact anyone that gives us their information. But remember, we don't have everybody's information. So typically the person that submitted the case to us provides us with their contact information, and that is who we interact with. If more family members reach out to us, we will add you guys to that contact list, as long as it doesn't get to the point where we're expected to call 50 family members and tell them all the same thing. But if you want to reach out to our office, we certainly will include you. We'd love to have you involved, so that if we can't get in touch with somebody, particularly in the Weaver case, I want to say that that James's brother passed away after we talked to him, if my memory is correct, and we didn't know that until later on, and we actually had I hope I'm getting this right. We had audio of James's brother talking to the new media reporter that we got to do a story on the case, and she actually asks him what it would mean to him, to have that case solved. And it was, I mean, now to go back and listen to it is just heartbreaking, because he didn't live long enough to see his brother's case solved. But if you reach out to us, and I think Clint answered your question about, we aren't going to find out anything significant before you do. Typically, sometimes law enforcement will call us and say, hey, we want you to be, on the phone with us or in person with us when we tell the family, X, Y, or Z. In the Freddie Farrah case, they called me and said, hey, can you come down to our office? We're going to meet with the family, and we would really like to have you here for that. And so it was pretty easy to figure out what that meant, that they were going to give them some pretty big news, and they wanted somebody that knew the family and had some experience with this to sit with them. So, but Anna, what we will do is we will call you if we are doing anything with that case, with James's case. And I think he went by Marlowe, I think is what they called him. But if that's the case, and we're going to do the playing cards, or we're going to do another spotlight. We had his case featured on the local media, but if we were going to do that again in another way, we would want to reach out to you guys. We always reach out to the families and ask your permission. Is it okay if we do this? Do you want this? Do you want this extra publicity? Do you want this? And so the more family contact we have, the better, in case somebody changes their phone number, their email, or something like that, we can reach back out to them or reach out to another family member. Um, um, Gloria is saying that she feels like her brother's case is just sitting on a shelf. And she asked how to obtain a public records request. Depending on the state you're in, and I think Clint responded, reach out to the records department, discuss what may be available. They may expect you to pay, but there are statutes in each state that are for FOIA, the Freedom of Information Act, or the Sunshine Law, whatever they refer to it as, public information in your state. And so you can craft a letter. Some agencies now have where you can submit a request on their website. So go to their website, typically go to the records part of their website, and they may have a place for you to submit a request. They may charge you. And let me tell you, we did records requests. I was telling you about one. We did records requests for every single sheriff's office in the state of Florida. And every single police department in the state of Florida. And there's 67 sheriff's offices, and there's like 260 police departments. And we did public records requests for all of them, and we have received the information for free from some of the larger agencies. We've received information for very cheap from some of the larger agencies, and we have gotten ridiculous invoices from some of the smaller agencies, $1,000 plus for records, where other larger agencies charge like $60. Jacksonville Sheriff's Office charged us $60 for 1,200 cases a few years ago, and some police department, I can't remember which one, wants over $1,000 for what's probably going to amount to 12 cases, if that many. So. So that's how you do it. Again, if you didn't hear, if a case is open or active, or they say it's open or active, they are exempt from releasing that information. If they do release that information, some of it is exempt, like names, phone numbers, addresses, social security numbers, stuff like that. So you may get a report that is redacted, but you could get a report potentially. Shannon says all of her case was lost, including the cinder block that killed her. We have heard that story, so many times that it makes your stomach turn. That has happened. It has happened probably in every single law enforcement agency that investigates homicides has lost evidence at some point, or was damaged in a flood, in a hurricane, in a tornado, in a roof collapse. An evidence storage facility is only so big. And depending on how many crimes are occurring in your jurisdiction, there is a lot more evidence going in than coming out. So they are constantly looking for cases that they can throw the evidence away on. It happens in every single jurisdiction, and that doesn't make it right. And it's a terrible thing. We have another case, Laura Crady, whose family, 10 years after she was murdered, the family went down to the sheriff's office to just get an update, and they found out that, similar to what somebody said earlier, they had early on they had ruled it an accidental death. They thought she had drowned in the river. And then the medical examiner and his investigator found adhesive residue on her mouth and wrists, and realized that she had not accidentally drowned, that she was murdered. But somewhere in that law enforcement agency, they did not change the determination on that death, and somebody threw away that evidence a few years later because, hey, it's accidental death. That we don't investigate accidents. We don't need this for anything. And sheriff's office was left to have to explain that to the family, that they had thrown away the evidence that very likely could have convicted. They had a suspect, and it may have taken a few years for technology to catch up, but That suspect has since died, and the family, let me tell you, they watched and waited, and they knew that that guy was going to probably die before they'd ever see justice. And when he died, they kind of celebrated it, posted it on Facebook. So let's see. You're welcome, Jewel. We just do what we can. I mean, we talked about how helpless it feels to be a family member of a unsolved crime and unsolved violent crime, and there's just so much we can't do. We can't investigate, we can't produce evidence, we can't provide evidence, we can't make people come forward, we can't make technology better, we can't make detectives care, we can't make the public care. We just can't. There's a lot we can't do, but there's some things that we can do, and that's what we focus on, and that's what we try to continue, and that's what we will continue to focus on. Melissa was told by the detective that her sister's case, he was promoted after 20 years in the department. 11 of those years, my sister's case was on his desk. Yeah. The detectives get promoted, they retire. The detective on my dad's case retired literally the same week that was the 10th anniversary of my dad's murder. And, it was on his desk for those 10 years. He was the detective, the lead detective that responded to the scene, and he retired. And so, it happens. And I know some cases that were, 5 years old, 3 years old, and had already been through 2 or 3 detectives, which can be extremely frustrating. But it's also, remember the positives here. We're trying to hold on to that hope. If that case gets reassigned, reach out, develop a relationship, try to develop a relationship with that new detective. Yeah, Gloria, look, you put your faith in the Lord, and whatever it is that you feel like guides you in those right directions, and just reach out, and we will help as we can with what we can. But have some faith, and try to take some form of or some role in this. Again, we're so limited and helpless, feels helpless, but we encourage you to take some kind of role. That could be something as simple as sharing your loved one's picture on social media, and if that's all you can do, then that's enough. That's what you can do. Shannon felt blown off by the detective I spoke to in Long Beach a couple of years ago. Hey, Shannon, you probably felt that way because you probably were blown off. I mean, and I don't say that. I try not to disparage detectives. I know a lot of them, and a lot of them are excellent at what they do, and they really do care. But I do this because it has to be done, because there are plenty of detectives out there that do blow people off. I called the cold case unit one time years and years and years ago because I overheard a conversation at the organization I worked at where somebody pointed to a picture of a victim on the wall and said, "Do you remember when so-and-so did that, killed him?" And they didn't know I was standing behind them. Then I went to my computer, I looked up the case and realized it was unsolved. I called when they left, I called the cold case unit, left a message. Didn't hear back. A couple weeks later, I ran into the lieutenant over the whole homicide department. I shared with the lieutenant that I had that information, that I called. I shared with him that I was a little bit concerned that if people with information on cases are not getting called back, usually they probably are going to change their mind and not want to talk. So he said, you'll be getting a phone call tomorrow morning from the cold case sergeant. I did, and that sergeant was not happy with me. And he was convinced that I left that voicemail on someone else's phone. And I said, look, I don't know you. I don't have any reason why I would say I left you a message when I didn't. Your name is X, and the voicemail said, "This is Sergeant X. I left the message." I don't know what else to tell you. It can, it can be frustrating, and this is where it's hard for families is to take that next step and to continue fighting. It can be draining. I know it can be draining, and we are here, to help. Um, you know, Melissa praying for my dad's case again. I really appreciate that. Uh, we do that for all of these cases. We pray for all of them. We hope for all of them. Anna saying same thing, that she hopes something shifts in my dad's case. You know, let's see. Yeah, we love Frida. Frida's great. If you haven't reached out in our office and talked to Frida, she is spot on. She will help you in ways that you never knew somebody could help you. And if she can't, then she will come in my office and we will brainstorm and we will come up with something. I promise you that. And we'll get Clint involved too, and he'll he'll help us. Ask Tammy. I can't believe Tammy's not on here. Ask about Clint's help with social media in her dad's case. Yeah, and Anna confirmed that Uncle Richard passed away. That was James Weaver's brother, and we talked about this last week or the week before, that how devastating that is for us, and how we try so hard to get something to people that are getting older and whose health is failing, and it just it's out of our control, but we do try. Shannon says thinks she's found information that should matter, but again didn't seem interested. Don't get rid of that. Again, somebody else could come along and that information could be valuable. Can a case be considered cold if it is not closed? Asked Jewel. Yes. In fact, most cold cases are technically still open. They don't close murder cases. They clear them, and they're either cleared by an arrest or cleared by an exceptional means, which could be that the offender died, but they know for sure it was the offender. So there's only a few ways that they can clear a case. So technically a cold case is still open. That is also how they get away with not providing those records sometimes, because even though it's cold, it's still open. A lot of agencies use different terms. Administratively, it could be suspended, but that's not closed. Or it could be inactive, but it's still open. You understand what I'm saying? So it's still open, but it's not being actively investigated. Let's see. Heather, you're welcome. We're fighting for you guys, I promise. Joe says what's worse is when something disappears without a trace, and quite honestly, we don't get into worse. Every situation is horrible, and I promise you that every single one of us that has lost somebody, has been devastated and traumatically impacted in one way or the other. And it really doesn't do anybody any good to start comparing losses. That's how somebody that ends up with somebody that was involved in drugs or prostitution, how they feel belittled because they feel like people don't view their loved one the same as somebody else, and that's just something that we don't subscribe to at Project Cold Case. Every victim is important. Every victim is equally important. Everybody's relationship is different with their with the loved one that they lost, and it's not fair for me to sit and try to pick out who's had it harder than somebody else. Every single one of us has had it really, really hard, and we try really hard not to belittle someone else's loss because it was a grandparent instead of a child, or a cousin instead of a sibling, or a disappearance instead of a hit and run. They're all traumatic and horrible in their own way. Let's see. Yeah, Justice for Ruth Haught. Yeah, they have been instrumental in keeping in touch with the detective on Ruth's case. Pam's sorry her mother died. They classified it as an overdose because she was a nurse. What just happened there? Was deathly allergic to them. Yeah, Pam, that's tragic. I hope that, again, that's out of our wheelhouse, but, if somebody out there that could help, you know, yeah. So Joe, I see you saying you went to the top, and that's again, the lessons that we've learned. You don't go from the detective to the top. It just you end up upsetting people, and then they won't talk to you for a long time. And we'd be happy to talk with you and strategize on some ways that have worked for us in the past, that have worked for the families that we help. You can eventually get to the top, but you go step by step. So the detective has a supervisor. That supervisor has a supervisor, and there are a number of supervisors in between before you get to the top. And typically, the guy at the top doesn't have time to field calls from families, and doesn't really like to be fielding calls from families. So he's gonna, or she is going to, come down, and the proverbial poop is going to roll downhill, and it's going to land back on that detective, and then that detective is really not going to be happy with you. And sometimes that's okay. We're not always here to make friends. It is all about accountability. But we have found that the more respectful that you are, and the more responsible you are in how you react, will get better results. And if it doesn't, then, as we talked about earlier, you work your way to the top. And if that's not right, and they still won't make it right, then you go publicly, and you tell the world, whether it's through your local news station, local newspaper, or through social media. But again, just remember that if you take that step, and if you start publicly, calling out an agency, do it with some proof. You know what I mean? Do it with some documentation, some emails. Because if there is any kind of misconduct, there needs to be accountability for that. But you can only, you have to be able to prove that there was that misconduct. And so I see you said that you went further. You went to the state police. That's exactly how you go up the chain of command. If there's misconduct, you go to the state police. Again, have that information, have those documents and that proof of misconduct. You can send letters to the attorney general in your state. You can send letters to the governor. Again, include that proof of misconduct. And if for some reason the investigating agency is not doing a good job, and they are a problem, then those are the people that can adjust it and help. So, let's see. Okay, yeah. So suspicious deaths and suicides. I would recommend that you go to Parents of Murdered Children and that second opinion services and look for those, because we just can't help with those, and it's just not in our expertise. Though, and please, if you either find an agency or an organization that is helping with those, please let us know, because we would certainly refer families to them. Joe, saying that there was no body and no death, so that they couldn't treat it as a cold case. I don't know what state you're in, but that is, there's some truth in that. Legally, you have to have a proof of a death to charge a murder. Because can you imagine if you charge someone with murder, and then 10 years later, the person that was supposed to be the victim shows up and they were not murdered? That's a liability and a legal nightmare. And so, typically, the first thing that law enforcement, or that the prosecutor has to prove, is that somebody was dead in a murder case, that somebody was killed. Now, that being said, there are examples of multiple no body cases where a conviction was obtained. We have contact with a statewide prosecutor down near Tampa that specializes in no body cases and has gotten convictions on 6 of them, I think now, maybe 7. And he will tell you that not one state attorney or district attorney would take the case. They're scared to do it. They won't do it. They're extremely difficult, and you have to have a ton of evidence to get that in front of a judge and jury that somebody that's missing was actually murdered. But it can be done. And again, maybe that's something we can help you out with. I just don't know if you're in Florida or not. And if you're not in Florida, it obviously makes it a little more difficult for us because we just don't have as many contacts outside of there. But reach out to the office. Let's see what we can do. We've been going now for a while. We still have a number of hour and a half. My kids got to go to bed. But I'm going to kind of leave you with this. I think I caught up on the questions mostly. If I missed you, I'm sorry. We'll go back through. We'll try to answer those in the comments or carry them over to next week. But I wanted to share something with you guys that maybe will help. So this is the book that my wife bought me after my dad was murdered. That she was desperate to say that she was desperate to help me, and she didn't know what to do. So she did all this research, and this was the best book that, the highest recommendations, the highest rating, and she gave it to me. It sat on my nightstand for over a year without a page being turned. And then after a year, I finally did pick it up, and I started reading through it, and this really, really helped me. And I have some pages that I highlighted and some things that I highlighted in this book. I wanted to share it with you guys. I wasn't ready to say goodbye. And there it is. Pamela Blair, Brooke Noel, and Pamela Blair. I think it's available on Amazon. They actually had it at Barnes & Noble when you used to be able to go places. They used to keep like 1 or 2 on the shelf. I used to buy them, and every time I walked in, I'd buy another copy because I would give them out to families or loan them out. And so it's a really good book. I have a few other books here, but maybe we'll save that for next time. But just for the people that are struggling, maybe consider reading a book like that. There's a number of other ones. Like I said, maybe we'll share those again, and kind of. Joe, I don't know that I want to get it, go back and forth with you. I mean, I can just tell you that it can be, it can come off as not very compassionate when you say things like that, like that your situation is worse. And so I think, we're in a very unique family here where we should all be trying to help each other and build each other up, and not try to belittle anybody or make their loss seem like it's less important. That's the way we are going to continue to do things. And I think, based on some of the things you said, that you've had some tough interactions with people. You're in New Hampshire, but your sister disappeared in Massachusetts. We know some really good detectives in Massachusetts and in New Hampshire. And in fact, I'm on a board with a group of homicide investigators, and one is with the Massachusetts State Police. So there's potential there, excuse me, that we could reach out and try to help you and try to connect you and try to get some answers and maybe some better understanding, and maybe even somebody looking at the case. And we're certainly always willing to do that for people. But I think, just remember that when there's a group of us out here that are all trying to help each other, that it can come off, even if that's not the intention, it can come off as being less than compassionate and considerate. And so we'll help you like we will help everybody. But one thing you'll never hear from us is that, that one person deserves justice more than somebody else, or that their hurt is less. And so, I just ask that people be respectful of the trauma and pain that other people have experienced that are sharing on here as well. So Diane asked about next week talking about missing persons cases in Tennessee. I can tell you that we've gotten a little bit off topic, and gone down missing persons, which is not really our specialty. So we do assist with missing persons. We've talked about that in a couple of different Facebook lives. When somebody is determined that foul play and the family believes foul play is there, then we can get involved and help raise awareness. For missing persons, though, I would also refer to the Q Center for the Missing. If it's a juvenile, the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, the Charlie Project, NamUs, all of those. I mean, see, I just rattled off 4 or 5 organizations that assist in missing persons cases. But when you talk about unsolved murders specifically, there's just not very many organizations that do that. So we try not to step on anybody's toes and duplicate services that are being provided when they're being provided well. And some of those other agencies are doing well. So make sure if your loved one is missing that they are in NamUs. If they're a child, make sure that the National Center has them, NCMEC. Everybody with a missing person should have something on the Charlie Project. Can I message you for those groups? Yeah, absolutely. We can reach out and we can give you some references to those groups. And like I said, we only say that because we want you to get the most specific help that you can. And so that's what we will try to do. So please, everybody, stay safe, stay home if you can, stay healthy. We'll get through this thing together, and when we come out the other side, we'll be able to do things hopefully in person, whether it's vigils or conferences and stuff like that. So keep it up with the interaction. We really appreciate everybody's involvement today. I hope that you enjoyed today's live, that you learned something, that we were able to share something that benefits you and your loved one's case. Call our office at 904-525-8080. Email us, info@projectcoldcase.org. We will get back to you however we can. We will help however we can, and we certainly will assist in any ways that we can. So thank you all so much for joining me. We'll be back next Tuesday, probably around 6 o'clock to do this again. So thanks so much. Take care. See you next time.